Hello, it's Anthony Chadwick from Webinar Vet, welcoming you to another episode of VETChat. I'm very fortunate today to have one of my LinkedIn buddies with me. I do love a bit of LinkedIn. Julie Cappel is a vet based in Michigan, Florida at the moment, but qualified from Michigan and has had a really varied career as a practice owner, great interest in avian medicine, and is now doing some really great work supporting the younger profession around life coaching, compassion fatigue. And I'm really looking forward to digging deeper into some of those topics, Julie. But first of all, thank you so much for taking time. It looks like here it's nice and sunny, but I think a bit warmer where you are than where I am.
Right. It is quite beautiful here today. So I'm fortunate to be here in Florida. But thank you for having me. I really appreciate being here.
Yeah, it was a shame. As I was saying, I was confined to the booth at VMX with a sore back. But I think, both had a good time in different ways, didn't we? You got to see a lot of old friends, and it is a fantastic conference, very big. Kevin Costner here this year, which my wife was very excited
I
about, although she
enjoyed
wasn't
him.
at the
Yeah, he
conference.
was good.
It was interesting to see how much he appreciated the vets that have been in his life in those particularly difficult times around euthanasia and so on. And I know we'll probably maybe dip into that a bit later on about compassion fatigue and euthanasia and all those issues as well.
Yes.
But first of all, perhaps tell us a little bit about the career from perhaps were you quite young when you wanted to be a vet, or was it an older discovery?
Yeah, my mom is a big animal lover. So she wanted to be a cowboy. She always loved horses. We always had dogs. And so I think I inherited my love for animals from her. And the first I remember wanting to be a vet was in 6th grade. My teacher at the time had us doing book reports every week, but we could choose our own book. So I remember her one day when I went up to turn in my book report, she stopped me and she said, "I noticed that every book you read is about animals, horses or dogs, or, because that's the ones I was interested in." And she said, "I really think you might want to think about being a veterinarian when you grow up, because, they'll probably be having more women in the profession." And, she had kind of done her homework. And
Wow.
so I think she put that into my head. And from then on, that's what I was going to do. I was determined. So I went all through school thinking that what I was going to do. And then I went to Michigan State and worked my way through there, and got married right after I graduated, and got a job, and just never looked back. I really love vet med.
I know you had your own practice for a long time as well, didn't you?
I did.
When did you finish or sell the practice?
Well, I technically sold my practice in 2018, but then I didn't leave until about 2022, the end of the year. I kind of wanted to stay and make sure that it was running well, and
Yeah.
help the next owner kind of get things going. I always wanted to be an owner. I always had an interest in business. I thought that it would be fun to have an MBA, maybe do some business thing. That was kind of like my backup plan for vet med if I didn't get into vet school, is I probably would have gone into some kind of other business. I'm one of those people that doesn't like to have a boss, I guess.
I think I'm the
So,
same.
yeah, yeah.
We are independent, slightly eccentric bunch vets, aren't we?
Yes, we absolutely are.
I'm impressed. My wife is a teacher, and you often see on the news or it's in a newspaper. A teacher said I would come to no good, and look, I'm a top footballer, or I'm whatever I'm doing. Whereas actually, most teachers are really inspirational, and I certainly see that. I occasionally go into my wife's class to teach a sort of environment and animal lesson,
Yes.
and it's clear how the kids kind of follow her. And I think it's all about, if you have a relationship with the kids, and you like them, and they have a relationship with you, they're much more likely to behave, etc. Behavior will be better. And
Right.
I suppose that's the same also in veterinary practice. If you think that all the owners in the area are idiots, then probably that's more your problem than theirs, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things I teach when I life coach people is it's all about your thinking. Is if you think the clients are mean and ugly and dumb or whatever you think, that's what you're going to see. And, that's one of the interesting things that I really loved about life coaching was the idea that you can change all of it if you want to. That it's all under our control to feel better, do better, live better, just by changing the way we think about a lot of things.
Because actually, for me, gratitude grounds it all. We are, I was similar to you. I was 8. My friend was running around the playground, stepped on a baby sparrow and killed it. And I thought, oh, had I been a vet, I might have
You
been
could
able to
have
save its
prevented
life.
that.
And here we are, many, many years later, and both of us have fulfilled our dream. We've become vets, had a really satisfying career.
Yes.
That's a real blessing. So many people work and aren't doing what they love, and that's really
Right.
sad, isn't it?
It's very sad. Yeah. And that's one of the reasons that I like to come on these podcasts, do my podcast, and just try to encourage people to really go for their dreams.
Yeah.
Whatever it is that they want to do, even if it's not their profession, but if they've always wanted to sing or dance or like throw that into your life and just do it because it goes by so fast, doesn't it?
My wife, again, does a lot of music at the school, and the government have sort of devolved some of the music budget to the local government now, our local mayor. And she was at the sort of launch meeting, and she said a young boy, young man, early 20s, and he stood up and he said, "I'm a musician." And I was quite taken by that because, of course, I play the guitar, but I don't think of myself as a musician. So I decided that that would be a good way to describe myself because I've just started. I love music and I love performing and singing. So we have a local bar at the end of our street, and once a month I go down and I play guitar for a couple of hours down there. So
Oh,
I can class myself as a musician. We don't have to
yes, you
say
can.
world class or anything, but I'm a musician.
Yeah. Well, we have that in common because I love music. And when I was a kid, I played instruments and was in the marching band and all that. Both of my children are artists. My son's a musician, my daughter's an opera singer. And so I really encouraged the arts in my home.
Yes.
And they're both living their dream jobs. It's not easy to work in those kind of careers,
No.
but it really is all about finding your passion and that's awesome that you go down there and sing and play.
Well, and I sing at home as well. I think my wife enjoys it because she's musical as well. And I think
Sure.
singing actually, even just to yourself, it raises your spirits, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that you can recommend to yourself if you are feeling low is just start singing or dancing. Because
Yes.
it's really hard to be sad or stressed or upset when you're singing or dancing.
Well, I think the killer says, "Are you human or are you dancer?" And I definitely am a dancer, not human. Anyway, that's how I would categorize. No,
Exactly.
it's
Me
really
too.
interesting. I mean, obviously, you've moved into life coaching, and life coaching, in some ways, we learn from our whole life experience. So, that wisdom that you've learned over your life, the things that went wrong, sometimes, well, in my view, have always taught me more than when everything's going right.
Yes.
So we learn, and to be at our sort of age now, for you to be doing this, you've got so much wisdom, to give into that sort of younger generation of vets. What are you seeing as the kind of, obviously without breaching confidence, but how are you working with vets and vet techs in the profession, and where do you see the areas that you can really help them, and what sort of strategies are you using? And perhaps for people listening now, without having their own life coach, what are the maybe 2 or 3 tips that you would say, here are simple things that you can do that will help, make your life more fun and enjoyable?
Yeah, absolutely. I see a lot of people come to me when they're either feeling stuck because they
Yeah.
don't see a way out of their student loan debt, their job, they're in a job they don't really love. So that feeling of being overwhelmed by their life and being stuck. is one. And then the other one that I see a lot is the imposter syndrome, that we feel unworthy, we feel like we're not smart enough or good enough, or we just don't have that self confidence and that self love. And so that adds to the stress. Then, if you don't think that you can do this job well, then obviously you're going to be stressed every day because you're worried that something bad's going to happen. So I see a lot of that. And the reason that I got into life coaching and loved it so much, the classes that I went through and the certifications that I went through really taught the idea that, first of all, life is not supposed to be happy every day. And we have a misconception of that from, our parents wanted us to be happy all the time. They didn't want us to cry or be sad or, have a bad day. And so we have this thought that if something bad happens, that that's unusual and wrong. And so we fight against those negative emotions, and that adds to the stress. When you should feel sad about something and you're fighting against it, then that is part of the feeling trapped in all those negative emotions because they just get stronger.
Hmm.
One life coach that said it was like pushing a beach ball underwater. Like the more you
Yeah.
try to bury your negative emotions, the stronger they get. And I thought that was a really interesting concept. And the other one that I love to offer people is that we have this normal primitive brain that's very, very negative, and it likes to seek out all the danger, all the negativity, all the things that might harm us. And that runs us, and we don't really even know it. So
Hmm.
when you start to understand that you, and I call it the Chihuahua brain because it reminds me of a little scared Chihuahua that wants to bite me all the time.
And they do like to bite chihuahuas, don't they?
Yeah, because they're afraid, right?
Yeah.
So that's why I like that analogy. They're scared. They're not mean, they're scared. So if you realize that you have this really strong part of your brain that's scared all the time and worried all the time and trying to protect you, that's where all that negative emotion comes from. And all your past stories of failure and all the things that happened when you were a kid, it just sits up in there and gets stronger and stronger. If you don't sort it out, learn about yourself, sort out all those stories that you have about yourself, and then decide on purpose to change them by using
Hmm.
your higher brain and
Yeah.
gratitude and work. And it takes some effort, but you can change those stories around. And if you do get to the point where you're good at recognizing the negative thought and then saying, oh yeah, that's I think that all the time, but I don't want to keep thinking that, I'm going to think this instead, and you purposefully change your thoughts, life just starts to get easier and better. And it's not as simple as I say it because it takes
Hmm.
a lot of work to figure all that out. But my number one tip is you first have to learn about yourself and what you're
Yeah.
thinking. If you think every client's mean, they're all going to look mean. If you think this job is impossibly hard, it's going to be impossibly hard. If you think you're not worthy or you're not good enough or you're not smart enough, that's going to keep coming back.
And actually, the opposite, if you think the majority of people are good people who want to do the best for their
You're going to
pets,
see it. Yeah.
then it will be a lot more obvious, won't it? I think
Yes.
we are ruled by our emotions, aren't we? As you said, the emotional trigger always comes first. I think
Yes.
we had a book called The Chimp Paradox here, Chimp, Chihuahua, the same thing. And it was very
Right.
much
Very similar. Your chimp
the
brain.
first thing that happens is go the emotion thing, and then you start to rationalize, don't you? The rationalization is always later than the
Right.
emotional outburst.
Yeah, and most of the people in our profession are highly emotional people because that's why we got into it.
Yes.
Because we love animals, and many of us even love people, or even if you don't love people, the animals, the people are animals, I sometimes say,
Yes.
like it's all part of the package. This profession in particular attracts very highly empathetic, highly emotional people, which is great because you need those skills to be a good veterinarian. But then you have to learn how to let some of that go so you can actually focus on yourself and your well-being and your family and your life or whatever you're trying to build beyond vet med.
Just out of interest, with your life coaching, percentage wise, how many men and how many women are you coaching?
I would say probably 99% women. Yeah, I have one or two men. I think that's not probably not good, because I think part of that is the men wanting to be strong and not admitting they have a problem and
Yes.
keeping it all inside. It's not that they don't have the emotions and the thoughts and the problems that women have. I think they're just less likely to admit it, or
Yes.
less likely to try to remedy it. Maybe they just kind of like tough it out, or maybe they're more logical. I don't know.
Do you think sometimes women lack confidence? Whereas, I always use the example of a woman. I don't want to get into trouble for people listening. So, I'm not trying to
We won't get
generalize,
angry
but
at you. Whatever you say, it's
the good
okay.
thing with the podcast is nobody can throw anything at you. So I'm okay for the moment. But,
Right.
and I look at people, women I know in my own life, and they will often be much more able, but they'll say, well, I need to do 10 things to qualify for this job and I can only do eight. So
Right.
therefore, I'm not going to apply for
Right.
it. Whereas a
Yeah.
man will go, well, I can do five. I'll see if I can get away with it, um, and, hopefully I'll learn those other things and get better. And therefore, you see more men in higher levels of management and so on. And obviously there has been a bias, but it was interesting looking at one of the reports for one of the big veterinary corporates in the UK, and now more women are at senior roles than men. Now, obviously, it's a very female profession, so there's still quite a lot of men at higher levels. But is that, do you think, part of the issue as well with things like imposter syndrome? I mean, of course, I think we all get that a bit, but I would always have the attitude of, no, I'm going to have a go at this. And, I think I find that relatively easy to push to the background.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think as women growing up, there is a lot of pressure on,
Mm,
being the kindest, being like we're expected to be more kind. We're expected to be
yeah,
more controlled. We're expected to look, we got the makeup and the hair and,
yeah,
I think there's just a lot more expectations on some level in women. And then I think we're our own worst enemy because we become very perfectionistic. And I think veterinarians, even more so,
mm,
we're very much into perfectionism, and I'm no exception. And so we have to kind of struggle like, okay, well, isn't it okay if it's not perfect? Is it okay that,
yeah.
I don't have my hair done? Or is it okay if I make a mistake in the veterinary hospital or while I'm leading people? And so I do think on some level, as children, women get a little more pushed to that perfectionist or, people pleasing maybe side. So I do think more women struggle with these things than men. Because men, I raised a daughter and I raised a son, and you expect your boys to like hit and punch and throw tantrums, but for some reason we expect our girls to be quiet and nice and kind, and it's
Mm.
not really fair because we kind of squash their strength and their
We have
resilience, and
gender expectations, which
biased a
we
little
put
bit.
into the next
Yeah.
generation.
Yeah, I don't like to think that that's true, but on some level it is true. It's a societal thing, and I don't think it's always bad, but I do think it feeds into that insecurity that a lot of women have.
Hmm. I think you were going back before, talking about bad experiences as well. And, at the moment I'm sore with my back. But I think if you see the bigger picture, one, it makes me really appreciate just that ability to walk. And
Right.
obviously, that's sometimes a bit retrospective. Do they say that health is wasted on the youth because they don't really appreciate it? It's only when things
Right.
start dropping off that you sort of appreciate them a bit more, but then also strive, to keep that health. So obviously I've neglected my back a bit. So I need to now put more time in. So sometimes you almost need a knock to realize that you need to change things around a bit, don't you, as well?
I think if you can think of it that way, that every negative thing that happens in your life, it's happening for a reason.
Hmm.
It should be this way, because I think sometimes we fight it so badly. It's like, well, this isn't fair. Why me? We
Yeah.
all that energy we put into fighting the negatives takes away from the lessons that were to learn. I was applying to veterinary school at Michigan State back in those days. Um, you applied to that, just that one, that was the state I lived in, that's where I applied. There wasn't
Yeah.
like these, where you could apply all over the country. And so the first time I applied, I didn't get in. Of course, I was crushed because that was my dream. And so I applied again the following year and I got on the waiting list.
Mm.
And so I had to wait another whole year. But I was really determined that that's what I wanted to do. But going through those two rejections that I went through and that waiting an extra year, I think set me up for being resilient, changing the way I looked at things. Like I'm not lesser than because it took me two tries to finally get in on my third try. That didn't make me a worse vet or a stupid person. It just happened to
Yeah.
be the way the chips fell that year. So I think having those kind of setbacks in your life, in the moment, it's terrible and you cry and you grieve and it's like a
Mm.
death. But then once you turn around and pick yourself back up, you gain all these skills that you wouldn't have had otherwise. If everything was easy and everything was good and everything was perfect, life would be really boring and you wouldn't grow and change. And
Yeah.
there's something about pain that changes you.
Yeah, I think definitely. I mean, I had a similar story of not getting in first time, applying back to the vet school, and them telling me, "Well, if you can't get in first time, then we're not interested in you." But my hometown university, Liverpool, which is a great city, and I was more interested in the course, and I was able to get in and have a great, really satisfying career. And I think you're right. Those knocks. I do some lectures occasionally with in the vet schools, and part of it is saying to them, I did things wrong. I got things wrong early on in my career, and I'm still here. I've not been struck off. I think
Right.
sometimes people worry about things that are actually never going to happen, and worry is definitely corrosive. I remember my mum was a
Yes.
great worrier, and I think I inherited that, or I learned from that. But at some point in my life, I just thought, actually, this is not good for me. And I'm not saying I don't worry, but I don't
Sure.
worry a great deal because, on the whole, most things that you worry about don't happen.
Right. Right. Yeah, there was a really good book that I read. Might have been Dale Carnegie, but it was something about worry because I'm the same. My mom's a big worrier and I kind of inherited that from her. But the key there is to know that about yourself. If
Yes.
now you say I used to worry, but I've kind of changed the way I think about things, that's coaching yourself.
Yeah.
That's understanding that I have a tendency to worry about what happened yesterday and what's going to happen tomorrow. And so, therefore, I have to work on taking those thoughts about those things and bringing them back to where I am right now. I'm safe. I'm, having a lovely chat with you. I don't have to worry about
Mm.
what's going to happen in an hour or what happened yesterday. And that's a skill. It takes practice, and it takes coaching sometimes.
I think living in the present moment is very fulfilling, isn't it? Because you enjoy the moment.
Right. It's difficult. I get that. But if you can just one exam room at a time, one pet at a time, and not be worrying about who's waiting or what's happening or what happened yesterday or I,
Yeah.
I made a mistake, like that makes life easier, but also just brings you more joy because then you don't miss out on the good stuff that's right in front of you because you're thinking about yesterday.
Just finishing off with a bit of clinical. Obviously, you were in your own practice in Michigan for quite a long time as an owner, but obviously had a special interest in avian medicine.
Yes.
What sort of birds were you treating, and what were the conditions that you perhaps see in Michigan that's maybe a bit different from the UK or other parts of the world?
Well, we mostly treated parrots of different shapes and sizes, all the way from budgies up to, macaws. Some pigeons, some doves, some chickens and turkeys over my life. I treated a few of those that were pets. Mostly when I first started doing avian medicine, there was a lot of nutritional problems, especially with the parrots, because it was like people feeding them seed and not really giving them a good diet. So we had a lot of that, but it was injuries, broken legs, somebody sat on their bird or stepped on their bird or ran it over with a desk chair or,
Mm.
those kind of things. And then a lot of times just infections and things that crop up in birds. Sometimes they get a infection in their GI tract or, some kind of bacterial problem. We treated a lot of that, some surgeries, but I think mostly it was the husbandry in a lot of ways that people don't really understand. And it's gotten way better. And people know now how to feed their birds. And so now we're
Yeah.
seeing a lot of longevity problems. We have parrots that are 40 and 50 and
Yes.
and they have an overgrown beak because they used to be on a bad diet and it never stopped overgrowing and those kind of maintenance issues. I don't know how that differs from the UK because I don't know what veterinarians see over there.
It's probably very similar. I mean, I didn't see a lot of birds, although I'm a keen bird watcher. I suppose as a dermatologist, what I would see would be things like beak and feather disease and obviously
Feather
behavioral
picking.
issues.
Yes.
Is that how good is the husbandry from a welfare perspective? I worry about parrots. They're such incredibly intelligent animals. Putting them in a small cage, do you find that people kind of get that now and they're kept in larger enclosures?
I think so. I mean, I have thought over the years. I mean, when I was young, I always wanted to own big parrots. That I just loved birds. I've always loved birds, and so that was kind of my idea. I'm going to have a big parrot when I get older. Once I started working with them and realized how hard they are
Yeah,
and how difficult they are, I never got any big birds. The biggest I got was cockatiels and quakers and those kind of
yeah,
birds I've kept. But I got to the opinion that they really shouldn't even be pets, which is
yeah,
kind of a hard thing to say for somebody that loves treating birds. But I really do think that's part of the problem with them. I do think people are understanding now more of that. Like I've seen people actually free flying their birds, which is kind of dangerous, but I've seen that. And then a lot of people understanding that, they need larger cages, they need to be out of the cage, they
yeah,
need to be more part of the family.
yeah,
But I still think they're wild animals in a lot of ways. They're not domesticated like a lot of our other pets. And I don't always think people understand that. And I think that's where the feather picking comes from. They get sexually frustrated a lot of times. I think sometimes they get aggressive because of that. I don't think I've ever met an Amazon that I would trust to put my finger out to. People will say, "Oh, he
yeah.
won't bite you." I'm like, maybe.
That's like the Rottweilers that I used to see, and they'd be growling, and he'd say he's just talking to you, and I'd say, well, yeah, but I don't like the language he's using.
Exactly. Yeah. I don't like the way he's talking to me. So, on some level, I do think that people have woken up to that.
Yeah,
But I still think a lot of people don't understand what they're getting into when they have a bird. I had a Quaker for I think she lived to be 18. So when you're getting a bird, you're committing to a good,
yeah,
some of my cats live to be that long, and that's a small bird. The bigger the bird, the longer they live. And
yeah.
so you might be committing to 30, 40, 50 years of pet ownership of a really demanding individual because they're so smart. You have to keep them mentally stimulated. And so, as much as I love birds, I think that they're not for the faint of heart.
Yeah, they're difficult to get the husbandry right, which is often the way also with reptiles and amphibians,
Yes,
etc., etc.
exactly. Yeah, reptiles are much the same. Reptiles just handle it better when they're not being well cared for. It's harder to kill them, I think,
Mm,
in a lot of ways. But
yeah,
and it takes longer for them to get sick. It takes longer for them to get better. But I think of reptiles as kind of prehistoric birds. They're very similar.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. Julie, it's been absolutely amazing speaking to you. I've really enjoyed
So
learning
fun.
more about the coaching and the amazing work that you're doing. As you've said, it's one of, if not the best job in the world. And when we see vets and vet techs leaving, perhaps after not too long in the profession, it breaks my heart, and I'm sure it breaks
Yes,
your
me
heart as
too.
well. So the work you're doing is really, really important. So thank you so much.
Yeah, it's really a pleasure to do what I do. And in doing this, I get to meet so many people as well, which is super fun.
Thanks so much, Julie.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and thanks everyone for listening. Hopefully, see you on a podcast or a webinar very soon. Take care and have a great rest of the day.